6 hours before my wedding rehearsal, I was standing in a hospital parking lot in the rain, coordinating oxygen supply routes for a collapsed distribution center. That's my job. I run emergency logistics for the Pacific Northwest's largest hospital network. I've rerouted ambulances through active sinkholes. I've negotiated fuel access during a government shutdown at 2 a.m. with a state official who did not want to be awake. I do not panic. I assess. I build a map. I move. So when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother, I read it the way I read everything, carefully, twice, before I let myself react. It said, "We gave your venue deposit to Victoria. You'll understand when you're older. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm Tatlumput Isa years old. And this is the story of the 6 days between that text message and my wedding, and how, by the end of them, my entire family learned exactly who they'd been underestimating." I called my mother. She picked up on the first ring, which meant she'd been waiting. "Mom, what did you do?" "I made a practical decision," she said. "Victoria's showcase has investors flying in from New York. Your little ceremony can be rescheduled. You're strong, sweetheart. You always land on your feet. I have 200 guests arriving in 6 days." "Then you'd better start calling them a pause. Don't be dramatic. This is exactly the kind of reaction that exhausts everyone around you." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in the rain for 40 seconds. That's a long time to stand still when you're someone who's never still. $12,000, my venue deposit, had come out of a joint account my mother insisted we open 2 years earlier for family emergency. I'd stopped using it. I'd forgotten she still had access. I called my fiancé, Daniel. He picked up in one ring. "She took the deposit," I said. 3 seconds of silence. Then, "Which account?" "The joint one." "I should have closed it. How long do you need to replace it?" "I can move money tonight, but the venue has a 48-hour window. If I don't lock it by Thursday, they release the date." "I'll call the venue directly. What's the contact name?" "Daniel." My voice was steadier than I felt. "If you fix this quietly, my mother will never believe there were consequences. She'll do it again. She's done it before." Silence on the line. Then, "What do you want to do?" I looked at the rain running down a windshield that wasn't even mine. I thought about 14 months of dinners where my mother redirected every conversation back to my sister's business. I thought about my father asking Daniel, with genuine condescension, whether he had a pension plan. I thought about every year I'd been the one to move, adjust, absorb, disappear. "I want to stop protecting them from what they are," I said. Daniel exhaled, not a sigh, the sound of a decision being made. "Then don't." Here's what my family knew about my fiancé. Daniel Voss was a quiet, slightly awkward environmental consultant who drove a 10-year-old truck and never talked about money. My mother called him well-meaning. My father once asked him at Thanksgiving if he'd considered going back to school for something more stable. My sister Raina introduced him at a dinner party as Claire's boyfriend, the one who does tree stuff. Daniel laughed every time. He laughed because he knew something they didn't. What they didn't know, what Daniel had asked me to keep private because he valued his anonymity more than their approval, was that Daniel Voss was the founder and controlling shareholder of Voss Environmental Systems, the firm behind the water purification and flood mitigation infrastructure for 11 Western states. His technology was under federal review for a contract worth $400 million. He'd been on a trade magazine cover 3 years earlier. He just had a beard now, different glasses, and a family who'd never once been curious enough to look him up. My father, meanwhile, had spent 8 months trying to land a meeting with Voss Environmental Systems. His development company had submitted 2 proposals, both declined. He had no idea he was being declined by his own future son-in-law. I'd found this out 11 days earlier, over dinner, Daniel's fork hovering above his plate. "Your father's company submitted again," he said, voice neutral. "Compliance flagged some irregularities in his pricing models. Does he know it's you?" "No." "Are you going to tell him?" Daniel looked at me for a long moment. I was going to let the process run. But I think that depends on what happens next. I didn't know what he meant. Then I knew exactly what he meant now. That night, I opened a folder on my phone and titled it the way I title everything at work. Date, incident type, status. Not out of anger, out of habit. The same instinct that taught me that when a system fails, you don't pretend it didn't happen. You map it, you name it, you show exactly where the break occurred so it never takes down the whole network again. The conference call was set for Thursday morning. My mother, my father, my sister Raina, her fiancé Todd, and me, officially to discuss the weekend. Actually, to hand me a finished decision and call it a conversation. What none of them knew, I'd already spoken to an attorney. Daniel had already spoken to his compliance team. And what nobody could have prepared for was what Todd was about to find on the internet at 11:47 that night, when curiosity finally got the better of him about the quiet man who drove an old truck and did tree stuff. He called me, not Raina, me. Who exactly is Daniel Voss? His voice was flat, stunned, the voice of a man who feels the ground shift and is still deciding whether to admit it. I looked at my documentation folder. 17 entries, time-stamped. That, I said, is the right question. And you're the first person in this family to ask it. Todd didn't sleep. He texted me at 1:00 ng umaga, then 3, then 5:00, 15. Each message more bewildered than the last. Found 17 articles. His company built the flood system for Portland. Raina told me he was a park ranger. I didn't explain. I just replied, Thursday, you'll understand everything. I dressed the way I dress for federal coordination calls, navy blazer, pressed to trousers, the calm expression I'd practiced in mirrors through my 20s until it stopped being practice and just became who I was. Daniel wore what he always wore, flannel work boots. The quiet confidence my family had always mistaken for a lack of ambition. We drove separately. I wanted my own car in that driveway, my own exit, my own way to leave without asking permission. My mother had set the table with sparkling water and linen napkins, the civilized confrontation set up. My father sat at the head with a legal pad, chairing this like a board meeting instead of an ambush on his daughter. Raina wore cream silk and the patient exhaustion face she used when she wanted everyone to know she was tolerating something beneath her. Todd sat beside her, eyes flicking between Daniel and his phone, doing math that wouldn't resolve. We're glad you came, Claire, my mother began. We know this is emotional, but sometimes families need to make hard choices together. I placed a printed document on the table. Before we start, $12,000 was withdrawn from a shared account without my authorization. I've filed a dispute with the bank, and I've been advised to document this conversation. Her face tightened. That account was for emergencies. Funding Raina's investor showcase is not an emergency. My father tapped his legal pad. Let's not turn this into a courtroom. Your sister has a significant professional opportunity. We're asking you to move your date 3 weeks. That's reasonable. You didn't ask me. You took money and informed me afterward. Raina leaned in. I didn't know about the money. Mom handled that. But honestly, if you could just be flexible for once, none of this would be an issue. When have I not been flexible? She opened her mouth, closed it. I paid for my own college, I said. I covered Mom's dental surgery when Dad's insurance lapsed. I moved my graduation dinner so it wouldn't conflict with your portfolio review. I gave up an apartment I loved because you needed a co-signer. I have been flexible my entire life. What you're actually saying, Ria, is that you need me invisible, and you've confused the two. My father raised his voice. That is exactly the kind of dramatic language that makes these conversations impossible. I put a second document on the table, an email my mother had sent 14 relatives, listing Raina's showcase as the primary family event and my rehearsal dinner as optional, attendance not expected. My mother snatched it. That was a draft. I was simplifying logistics. You were emptying my rehearsal so Raina's event looked better attended? Silence hit the room like a change in air pressure. My mother turned, as she always did, to whoever she considered weakest. Daniel, perhaps you can talk sense into her. Sometimes love means helping someone see when they're overreacting. Daniel looked at her, unhurried. Claire is the most precise person I've ever met. She doesn't overreact, she documents. My father scoffed. With respect, son, you don't have the context. This family has navigated 30 years of dynamics you weren't part of. Which person in this family is always asked to compromise? Daniel asked. The question sat on the table like something heavy. Nobody picked it up. Todd had been quiet for 19 minutes, unusual for a man who normally filled every silence. Then he cleared his throat. I have a question, he said. Has anyone at this table ever looked up Daniel's name? My mother frowned. What do you mean? Searched for him. Read what he actually does. Reina rolled her eyes. He's an environmental consultant, Todd. We know. Todd turned his phone toward the table and said nothing. On the screen, the leadership page of Voss Environmental Systems. Daniel's photo, 3 years old, clean-shaven, standing beside a mobile water purification unit in a flooded Nevada town. Underneath, Daniel Voss, founder and CEO. My father reached for the phone. I watched his face move through 4 expressions in 6 seconds. Confusion, recognition, calculation, and finally something I'd never seen on him before, fear. My mother leaned over his shoulder. Voss Environmental, that's the company you've been. Yes, my father said. Reina looked between them. What company? What's going on? My father didn't answer, so I did. Dad spent 8 months trying to get a meeting with Voss Environmental. They designed the flood infrastructure and emergency logistics platforms he wants a contract for, worth tens of millions. He submitted 2 proposals. Both declined. I looked at Daniel. By him. Reina stared. You're that Daniel Voss. I'm the one who does tree stuff, Daniel said quietly. Nobody laughed. My mother recovered first, she always did, rearranging her face into warmth, the way she rearranged table settings before a fight. Daniel, why didn't you tell us? We're family. We'd have treated you differently. That, Daniel said, is exactly the problem. My father stared at that phone the way a man stares at a door that just locked behind him, not surprised, but slowly recognizing he'd been standing on the wrong side of it for a long time. Were my proposals reviewed fairly? He finally asked. By a team with no knowledge of our connection, Daniel said. I removed myself from the process entirely. Then why decline? Your pricing models had inconsistencies our compliance team flagged independently, your staffing projections didn't match your reported capacity. Daniel paused. And your second proposal listed Claire's professional relationships in emergency logistics as a strategic asset of your firm, without her knowledge or consent. My father went pale, not embarrassed pale. The pale of a man realizing the thing he thought was hidden had been visible the whole time. I turned to him. You used my name to sell your company to my fiancé's firm without telling me. He said nothing. Reina pushed back from the table. This is insane. We came here to talk about a weekend schedule. Todd looked at her. Ria, they took $12,000 from your sister's account to fund your showcase, and your mother told the family not to attend Claire's rehearsal. This isn't a scheduling conflict. Her face flickered, the first real crack I'd seen in a decade of curated appearances. I didn't ask her to do that. She looked at our mother. But you knew. My mother looked at the table. In that silence was every answer Todd needed. He stood. I need to take a walk. He didn't come back for 40 minutes. While Todd was gone, my mother cycled through her entire repertoire. She cried, which usually made me apologize. She accused me of jealousy, which usually made me retreat. She told Daniel that wealthy men who enabled family conflict were dangerous. She told me I'd regret this when she was gone, that I was destroying decades of family bonds, that one day I'd be alone and wish I'd been kinder. I sat still through all of it. I didn't argue. I didn't perform the role written for me since childhood. The dependable one, the absorber, the girl who could be disappointed without making a sound. Instead, I placed one final document on the table, a transcript of a voicemail my mother left my Aunt Linda 2 days earlier. One my aunt forwarded me that morning with a note. I thought you should hear this before Thursday. In it, my mother told my aunt that I was having an emotional crisis related to wedding stress, that Daniel was isolating me from the family, that Reina was trying to help, but I'd become hostile, and that relatives should attend only the showcase to avoid triggering Claire's instability. I played it on my phone speaker. My mother listened to her own voice, and for the first time in my life, I saw her face with nothing behind it. No strategy, no performant warmth, just the recognition that she'd been caught, not in a moment of poor judgment, but in a deliberate campaign to dismantle my wedding by destroying my reputation with the people I loved. That was taken out of context, she whispered. What context makes it acceptable to tell my family I'm mentally unstable? She had no answer. My father stood, gathering his legal pad. This meeting is over. Yours is, I said. Mine isn't. I told them every vendor for my wedding was secured with passwords they didn't have. Every guest had accurate information. An attorney had reviewed the withdrawal. I'd closed the shared account the next day, and I'm asking you both not to attend my wedding. My mother gasped. You're banning your parents? I'm protecting my wedding from people who tried to destroy it. My father pointed at Daniel. You did this. You turned her against us. Daniel stood, unhurried. I didn't turn Claire against anyone. I asked her what she wanted, and I didn't interrupt when she answered, You should try it sometime. They left. My mother called 11 times that night. I answered none of them. The consequences didn't arrive as an explosion. They arrived as a series of quiet collapses in rooms I was no longer standing in. 3 days later, Todd ended his engagement to Reina. He told her privately why. She announced it publicly, framing herself as the strong woman punished for her ambition. Todd responded with a single public statement. He'd ended things after learning the showcase had been funded by sabotaging his future sister-in-law's wedding. Within 48 hours, 3 of Reina's showcase sponsors withdrew. One was a wellness brand that didn't want its name anywhere near a story about a stolen wedding deposit. My parents didn't come to my wedding. 200 guests did, with accurate information, correct venue, and not $1 of it touched by anyone who hadn't earned the right to be there. I didn't do any of this out of revenge. I did it the way I do everything. I assessed the failure, I mapped it, I made sure it couldn't take the whole system down with it. Some people call that dramatic. I call it documentation.